Now it's recording.
Perfect. Okay. So thanks for that introduction. That was wonderful. So the interdependence of sleep and infant feeding and talking about meeting lactation goals is what this talk is about. As you already heard, I'm a mom of 3 myself who were born in 2002, 2005, and 2009. And I used to be a special education teacher, and then I've been a volunteer for La League for over 17 years now. And I've been a member and on the steering committee for South Carolina Breastfeeding Coalition for over 10 years and ended that last year. So I really am excited about this talk. I have a lot of different objectives in this talk, and they really all kind of go along with things for parents and things for professionals to consider. And I will say I have all my little squishy toys and water nearby. So definitely do the same for yourselves, get comfortable and join us. Okay. I have no disclosure, like financial disclosures. I'm doing this voluntarily for free. I'm an independent IBCLC, as you already heard. So why listen to me? Sleep is kind of my obsession, reading and learning about. And over the years, I have attended a variety of conferences on sleep and read a boatload of books. All right. Why is this important for us in lactation to talk about and educate ourselves about sleep? I really feel that, you know, parents and kids' relationships are at the heart of this. And they ask us a lot of questions, and we don't want to answer them without the information being accurate. They trust us and respect us coming to us for information, and I want to make sure that we give that as properly as we can. I'm doing a lot of myth busting at homes that I feel like I wouldn't have to do if we all kind of had the same information and shared the same information, update ourselves. I do value the variety of ways parents feed, sleep, and eat, and really think that the whole family matters. Okay. My own personal statement is that where I come from on this talk is that feeding our family is an emotional experience. Breastfeeding and lactation is about that whole relationship. I'm here in America, in South Carolina, and I feel like dominant culture in America tells us that independence is more important than interdependency. And kind of coming into both family care, my own parenting, and then also with lactation, that empathy and that reciprocity is invaluable. And it's not just about the volumes and the numbers and how much we pump or how many grams a baby took in, but really that parent giving their milk and the infant receiving the milk. So just considering whenever we're talking to parents about our care plans, or if you are a parent, that, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard job, but also supporting that relationship. Parents and babies' needs are interdependent. Babies are little humans. Babies are not adults, but they still are human. They have the same needs for love, connection, rest, comfort that the rest of us have. And vice versa, parents have those same needs. So keeping them both in mind when we're working in lactation. So I know not everyone is an IBCLC on this call, but clinical competencies as far as IBCLC care really matter. We got a little bit of a late start, so I'm not going to read all of these off, but there are several that cover sleep and feeding and why we as lactation consultants have to consider what is our scope if we're an IBCLC and educate ourselves on all the different clinical competencies. So weaning, you know, sleeping, night weaning, whatever it might be, supporting that dyad and parents' goals and really informing ourselves. So, all right. When you go into a lactation consultant meeting, where I know that we have a variety of people. Some people work at WIC, some people work in hospitals. I myself go into homes. So when I'm going into a home, I think about what is the parent's goal for feeding. I kind of try to think about what am I going to educate on that development. Maybe I'm going to see a 3-month-old today. Maybe I'm going to see an 8-month-old today. Maybe I'm talking about a prenatal, meeting with some parents. So normalizing newborn sleep and expectations is really important. And then I really feel like over and over and over, we all know what the number one thing we're teaching about is understanding that synchronicity of milk production and hormonal signaling, that how milk production works, and then supporting breastfeeding by also discouraging practices that interfere with breastfeeding or chest feeding. So, all right, parents. I feel like when I talk to parents today, I mean, I was stressed when I was a new parent, but I feel like the stress levels of parents are higher than ever. We're going into parents' homes with so much on their plate already before we even work about it. So sleep exhaustion, are they safe in their home? Are they going back to work and have financial stressors, body image issues, caretaking plans, trying to find childcare, trying to get childcare not to throw their milk out, mental health already before the baby comes. If there's a mental health issue, it's not going to go away. It might actually start to get worse because of lack of sleep and stress. And then, of course, they have that milk production, milk volume question. I feel like parents today are the most informed generation yet. They have all the resources. When I had Abigail in 2002 and Samuel in 2005 and Zachary in 2009, things changed. I had each of them in different states and I had different resources, and I had a lot of different books at my to get at the time when I had Abigail back in 2002. And then in 2009, there was updated books, but there's also a ton of social media that there wasn't before. And I feel like also one of the big things is a lot of marketing, a lot of questioning ourselves, comparing, a lot of pressure on parents today. And I think a big thing that really plays a role too is, I could tell before I got on this call what my heart rate was, my oxygen. We have so much information, but what do we do with that, right? What do we do with these little heart and cardiorespiratory monitors that are going onto little babies' feet? Why are we, we're kind of over dataed, if that makes sense, over information. I think that there's a positive aspect to social media and to online resources, and some good things that came out of the last few years with our lockdown and everything was that thankfully we still had a lot of Facebook groups and internet things and information that parents could really share with each other, and virtual logs. Like today, I usually do a talk in person. I'm standing, I get to walk around. But I still get to have this message recorded so people can see this later. So there's a lot of really good things about it. Parents can find like-minded groups. They can get, look for peers like them, what they're looking for. It really can help boost mental, load, mental support. And also really it's been critical for finding information. But I think there's also negative things going out there. So I tried to cover all the identifiers here, but these were things from TikTok. I think that we need to think about the pros and cons of social media. Parents are getting, how did I get my 5-week-old to sleep through the night? And what is sleep through the night? And how to get a baby to cry it out, and how long it takes for a baby to fall asleep in a snoo, or how long they'll stay asleep in a snoo, or things. So there's a lot of great community support, but is it advice? Is it unhelpful advice? Is it good information? I think there's some parent empowerment to social media, but also it's unregulated. And that means, how do you really know who is giving actual good information or not? And then I do think there's a lot of really good things, again, like I said, on social media. This is also TikTok, hopefully covered all the identifiers, but there's some good LCs. I have a TikTok, which I've got a couple of things on, but, I'm not very good at it. But there's a lot of great resources out there and actual good information, but how do parents and professionals weed through? Even sometimes I'll find something really good and want to share it, but then I find out that a lot of the other information on the website or on the person's account is inaccurate. So, it's what ebbs and flows, even what you're going to get there. Depression, anxiety, like I said, parents are already coming to us with these challenges. They already had maybe anxiety coming into a pregnancy, having to deal with fertility, loss, loss of a job, changes in their home. Maybe if they have a partner or not, that partner is also having mental health challenges. So we know, obviously, as lactation consultants, we don't diagnose, but we do screen. And especially if I'm doing a prenatal, I kind of try to talk to parents about, are you doing okay prior to baby coming? Because sometimes we have those sleep crises where parents just need a night, right? Where they just need to have some support for one day and they can get through it. And then we have other parents that really need to know, hey, there's resources out there like Infant Risk that you can take medications, you can still support yourself. But a lot of times, a lot of professionals will blame the baby's lack of sleep or parents' lack of sleep or how the baby's fed as the reason for this issue. So we have a lot of blaming babies or blaming sleep or blaming the feeding method on these issues. So obviously we all know this. I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's really important to talk about. And then I think we all know there's a lot of terms, like people will talk about sleep hygiene, but that sleep hygiene wording is meant for adults and older children. It's really not meant for infants. So thinking about sleep optimization, I was recently in Australia and I'm in South Carolina. There's a 15-hour time difference, and it took me about 2 weeks to get my body back. And what I did was go outside every day, make sure I sat outside and got my skin and my eyeballs in the sun. And then, cutting down on caffeine, talking to parents about things that they can do to help optimize their sleep is so important. So it's not blaming the feeding method or pitting the parent and child against each other, but talking about what are some acceptable things they can do. If you have 3 kids, you can't take a nap, right? It's just not crazy, not going to happen, right? If you're, say, sleep when the baby sleeps, that's not really good advice, because that's when parents are like, okay, now I can get something done. Or they're holding their baby so that they can sleep together and get some rest. So helping parents kind of support routines that feel good, getting exercise, just giving general information on how to care for yourself. Sometimes when you're so overwhelmed, you just can't kind of get out of your own way to think, oh yeah, that's what I can do. Just add this one more thing to my day. Okay, so a lot of people talk about studies talking about babies sleeping deeper and longer with formula, which we know is that pulls in the SIDS risk there. But I think it's important to note that there are studies out there that say that breastfeeding and sleep goes together, and that parents of exclusively breastfed kiddos actually get a little bit more sleep. And we do think some of that is due to the fact that they're keeping them in close proximity, so you could just lay back down and go back to sleep versus having to get up. But the sleep disturbances for parents are actually sometimes happening more with formula-fed little ones. So milk supply and feeding goals. I love this from Making More Milk, the book. I'm sure a lot of us have heard of this book. If you haven't, there's a great website and book here, Making More Milk. But they talk about the equation, right? The milk supply equation. Sufficient glandular tissue, right? Has there been a breast reduction, a challenge with hormones, whatever different reasons for that happening. Intact nerve pathways and ducts, was there a surgery, a trauma? Adequate hormones and hormone receptors, which we can send parents out to talk to their primary care or their OBs about getting their hormone levels and endocrine levels checked. Critical nutrients. I love that book, Boost Your Breast Milk. It's got great info on, the first half is all making milk, and the second half is lots of great healthy recipes. But then adequate, frequent, effective removal and stimulation. And that's where we come in as lactation. That's one thing we can help parents kind of figure out and control. That's like the horse versus the zebra, right? And we all know that if we talk about adequate, frequent, effective milk removal and stimulation, that is where we come into the discussion about sleep and nighttime. So 2 points that I'm going to go over, and I think that I really want people to hold in their minds through this whole talk, are this one and the next slide. So when we ignore cues and we encourage dysregulation of infant communication at night, that's not conducive of responsive feeding, right? So if we're talking to parents about, what that means is kind of, if we talk to parents about responsive feeding in the daytime, and then we say, hey, let's let babies cry and dysregulate their levels of communicating, right? They communicate by whining, crying, grunting, moving, and we don't pay attention to those cues at night. We're not really teaching responsive feeding in the 24-hour day period. We're just talking about two separate things. So one is actually sabotaging the other, right? And then the second thing to keep in your mind through this talk is lengthening newborn sleep for deeper sleep is not predictive of sudden unexplained infant death risk, infant safety, infant health, or milk production goals. So trying to get a baby to sleep longer and deeper is not supportive of responsive feeding or SIDS risk or, milk production goals for parents. So again, keep those two things in mind, the cues and dysregulation and the health risks. I'm just checking my thing so I don't go too fast with all these slides. So I wanted to just, and I know Sarah had asked earlier in the chat before we started the talk about different questions, but if you can just add in the chat some common concerns that parents have come to you that you think kind of intersect here with sleep, milk volume, and infant feeding. And I'll just wait a few seconds. I have a few on the next slide, but if anybody wants to either, even turn on your mic if you're on the phone and just tell me some things that you think kind of intersect. And if you don't have any, I'll just go on from there. If I don't teach my baby how to sleep, it'll be years or maybe they'll never learn. Yeah, parents say that all the time. What are common concerns around sleepy feeding volumes? They sleep longer and I give them formula, so I don't think they're getting enough breast milk. Concerns about where babies sleep. Okay, super. Thank you so much for those of you who added a few comments. That's great. So some of the things are kind of, when do I wake up a baby? Should I wake up a baby? When babies start to sleep through the night and those transitions happen, should I still get up and pump, right? What do I do about engorgement because my baby slept through the night? What happens if my baby's sick and I want to change my routine? How do I get back? Pumping at night. Should I get up and pump at night when my baby's sleeping? I have to work in the morning and I want to sleep. So I want somebody to give my baby a bottle at night, but I want to protect my supply, right? How do we do these things? Is there availability to directly breastfeed, chest feed at home at night and then pump during the day or vice versa? A lot of people wonder if babies falling asleep, are they getting enough, right? I still have participants tell me their doctor said never wake a baby in the early days. Yes, I mean, we have early days jaundice babies who need to be woken. And then we have babies who are doing wonderfully and healthy and their diaper counts are good and they don't need to be woken anymore. So there's a lot of anxiety about, I think, following the plans that they're given and then also understanding that parents get to change the plans. Parents are in charge, and also parents, these plans are not meant to be long-term. They're meant to be short-term plans for the baby that week. They're not meant to be how we then treat the baby for the first year. So I think that helps, especially for you all in the hospitals, just saying, hey, this is just your long-term, this is just your short-term plan for the week. This isn't your long-term plan. Things will change very fast. Okay. I think a lot of the big questions regarding pumping have to be brought up because, for me, volunteering with the Late League 17 years ago, most people either gave formula or breastfed directly. And now there's mostly, actually, I would say a big chunk, 60% or more, are combo feeding, right? Where they're doing formula sometimes, pumping sometimes, and breastfeeding or chest feeding sometimes. So different goals for different parents, right? So if a parent's okay giving formula once a day or already giving formula once a day, we might talk about what time of day that is. And if they're trying to transition to exclusively pumping or exclusively breastfeeding, then we might talk about, hey, every time you give that bottle, let's focus on pumping at that time of day also. Or if they want to have an emergency situation where they're having some mental health issues and need like a 12-hour break, how to do comfort measures, when to actually get some pumping, and who takes care of the baby. There's so many things around bottle feeding and breastfeeding at night or day. Like lots of parents I talk to about sleep, we talk about, parents will chunk the night. Maybe parent one will have from 9 o'clock to 2 a.m. and then one will overlap from 2 to 6 or whatever, so that each of them get a little chunk of sleep and the other one gets up. But then how do we protect supply and comfort while also making sure both parents get rest if there's more than one parent? So anyway, I'm sure a lot of you have had a lot of these questions, and a lot depends on the age of the baby too. So I think that it's really important, what I see a lot on television and magazines, on just social media ads, is that there's a lot of exploitation of parents, medicalizing normal. I don't really know how else to say that besides it's medicalizing normal. It's like, oh no, your baby's not sleeping through the night. You have to buy this formula or this diaper or have this pacifier or this blanket. And the truth is, babies are going to wake up no matter what formula or breastfeeding. It's problemizing normal. Thanks. That's a good one. So in the chat, she just said. So I think that's really a big important thing, is that there's a lot of exploitation of parents and anxiety around things because of those tactics. And I just think it's really shameful, and it really does a disservice to parents. So infant and young children, and I'm trying to go on about a half an hour at a time, so this is good. Here we go. So milestones. I love this little pamphlet from DHEC. Thank you to WIC and DHEC for these things. We love to talk about milestones, right? Let me see if I can get it into the screen. So CDC has a app, and I love telling parents about the app because it's free. First of all, it's a free resource. Parents love apps now. Not all of them are going to buy a book, but they will just add an app to their phone while we're talking. And all of the different milestones really intersect and interlap and kind of interweave with feeding and with sleep. So social and emotional, that dysregulation of cueing or that following cues, right? Interacting, parents learning about that communication part, the social emotional, just spending time together, skin to skin, cuddling, connecting, cognitive learning, problem solving, like babies are learning too. Babies and parents have those skills for latching and breastfeeding, or for bottle feeding, or just knowledge in their brains instinctually, right? We are mammals, parents, we're all mammals, and we have instincts and problem solve through things. I think a lot of parents kind of come to us with solutions they're thinking about, and they just want confirmation that it's okay to go ahead and work on those solutions that they're kind of working through. And we kind of just dig in with different suggestions that work for them. And then also movement and physical development. So I'm going to talk a little about swaddling later, and that impact on feeding and on sleep. And I think that's a really big milestone as babies move and change and grow in the first year. Any questions so far? Okay. You can always jump in at any time I can see as the chat pops up. So when we talk about infant readiness and milestones, I think that there's a lot of times two camps, right? It's like camp A, train a baby. Camp B, just let it flow naturally, wait for it all, right? And most parents and most families are somewhere in the middle, right? When I had 2 other kids and I was bringing them to, dance or gymnastics or lacrosse or soccer, and then I'm bringing my 3rd kid along, he had to nurse when I had time at those times. I followed his cues, but he also kind of had to nurse when it was convenient, right? There was a middle ground. And then also regarding sleep, each of my kiddos, for example, when my Samuel, my middle one, was a baby, my daughter was in preschool, and I had to wake him up out of the crib at a certain time, or out of my bed, or maybe he was in my arms sleeping, and we'd have to go get in the car and get his sister. So he kind of had to go with my flow, with our flow as a family. So there's a little bit of scheduling some things and also kind of going with the rhythm of the day sometimes too. So encouraging families on, we can't train teeth to grow. We can't train hair to grow. We can't train out the neurobiology of infant needs and readiness, right? When they are ready to sleep fully through the night, they will. And it's above a year. It's not below a year. And that's scary news for tired parents, but we're not going to say, oh, you're never going to sleep again, or things that are kind of dismissive. We're going to explain how they can prepare for that. And then, can we encourage walking and crawling and talking? Well, babies will do that when they're ready, but we have early intervention services for a reason. If we're not doing tummy time or keeping our, getting the baby to communicate, bringing them around with our adult day, talking about toys and handing them food when they're ready, then that's how we encourage that, right? So there's a little bit of in between. And I know I kind of went on a long tangent here, but I just think that's really the point, is that, parents find their balance based on their own kind of values and temperaments. So what is biologically normal? I really cannot stress enough that it's really important to not tell parents to breastfeed every 3 hours, or say feed every 3 hours, or, because babies, especially newborns, nurse every 90 minutes, right? They chunk feed. They don't nurse every 3 hours. They nurse between 3 and 6 o'clock 17 times, and then they don't nurse for a few hours again, right? I mean, that's exaggerating, but the truth is, right? A newborn will fall asleep, wake up, nurse, look around a little, snuggle, maybe as we call play, and then nurse again, poop, nurse again, fall asleep, right? It's not like they do things in order. It's really fragmented sleep, not consecutive sleep. It's very highly variable and individual. And I wake up at night too, so, and I'm over 50 now, 51. Hopefully I look good for my age, but yes, I'm 51, not 5 or 2 or 5 months or 19 days. So when you hear somebody saying, well, when will the baby sleep through the night? I kind of say, oh, how's your sleep going? Do you wake up at night? And then that kind of helps them realize it's not, doesn't matter. Every age kind of has their differences in sleep. Newborn sleep, like we said, is unpredictable. I think understanding that physiological component, the hormones, melatonin, body temperature rhythms that kind of are regulated by being held on our bodies, and we kind of co-regulate with our children at that age, and really every age. But before 4 to 6 months, that's when it really starts. It's not like it's completely maturated or mature at 4 to 6 months where they suddenly have all the hormones regulation. That kind of starts to develop, right? Understanding those milestones helps us understand separation anxiety and object permanence happens. It's happening between 4 and 9 months. So, and then also I'm going to go into why sleep regression is a myth, because again, that's that normal changes that develop around 4 months that happen where babies kind of wake up more. And, it in the newborn stage, it's kind of half and half, right? It's kind of evenly distributed. They sleep all these, half the time of the day, half the time of night. And then it kind of develops over the course of the first year. I think it's important to remind too that sleep talk, sleep information, sleep is very cultural. Not every culture thinks that you should sleep 8 hours. Lots of cultures have kind of monophasic versus diphasic, that polyphasic. We expect monophasic, right? One phasing of sleep. And then other cultures expect that kind of, waking up in the middle of the night to get up and do things, or, different ways of arranging their families, their beds, a big family bed on the floor, different way, home for a certain amount of time. And I think it's important to kind of think about a lot of the studies, and I read a lot of sleep studies for this, is that there's people being left out of studies here. Who is deciding to design these sleep studies, who's paying for them, and who's being left out of them. Now, this is a small chart in your slide, but I want to say I have this book. Anybody locally, I am happy to share this book with. But this talks about the average times for sleep and also the average awake times, right? And I love this book. I talk to parents about it. It's called Let's Talk About Your New Family Sleep, Lindsay Hookway. And it's got a boatload of research in there. But also, we want to talk about that this is not an algorithm for your specific child. If we say, oh, this many weeks old sleeps this many minutes or hours in the day and sleeps this much at night, that doesn't mean the child has to do exactly that. So I, at first, when I did this talk, didn't have this chart. And I added the chart in because it was requested that we have kind of what is normal range, right? We want to know what's outside of the normal range, but there's a bell curve. And so here's the normal range, right in the middle. And there's kids at this end and this end that are normal, and as long as they're growing normal and doing well. So it's very important that parents understand that we're not talking about consecutive. If we say, an 8 to 9 month old sleeps 12 hours, we're not saying consecutive 12 hours. We're saying in the 24 hours, right? Like weight charts. Thank you. Same thing, weight charts. If babies aren't on the 100th percentile, well, it's not a contest. It's not a race. They're not supposed to be all on this side of the bell curve. Some of them are supposed to be in the middle, and some here and some here, right? So understanding that normal sleep, I think a big part too of this is that when I was looking through all the social medias and really looking at different people's suggestions out there, a lot of things are focusing on those awake times, and a lot of the schedules, as you'll see, I have a slide on it, really focus on how long to let the baby be awake instead of, okay, when your baby cues to go to sleep, put them to sleep. Cues for sleep, right? And a lot of these are kind of similar to hunger cues, right? If a baby's fussing, maybe they're hungry. But also, if we let them go ahead and nurse and then they fall asleep, that's great. We filled two needs, right? We filled feeding and we filled sleep need. So one of the things is that, like, we talk about, when the baby, we say crying is a late stage of hunger. Crying is also a late stage of being tired. And then we kind of get overtired and kind of that second wind, and then a baby might miss their nap. But it's important that parents understand that they don't have to know at day one these cues. They're going to learn them, the instinct. I like the hunger cues listed on the USDA website. Yes, there's a lot of reassurance there. So it's the same thing with tired cues, is that the more we respond and kind of guess, right? Because at first we have to guess. The more, yes, nursing a 2 to 3 year old to sleep very nicely. Yes, nap time is easy. It's such an easy thing to nap. I nursed all my kids over 2 and 3. So, and that's so true. It's another tool in your toolbox for comfort for a long time. And you can just lay down and nurse them and then sneak away when they fall asleep, or stay in bed and sleep with them if you're exhausted, right? You're sleeping with your 2-year-old, they're having a tantrum, you get them nursing, they get a little snack, a little thirst, and a little comfort, and they get to fall asleep. But like I said, it's important to explain to parents that they're not going to, you might not get every time the right guess, but the baby knows you're trying, right? They feel that when you try over and over, that you are connecting with them and responding to them. And that's what responsive parenting is. It's not perfect parenting. It's just responding to your child, right, in the moment, and responding to their needs. I don't want to go too fast or too slow here, so I'm pretty heavily into these slides. Let's see, what number are we on here? Infant slide. So REM sleep and non-REM sleep. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole first year, but I thought I would put this on here to kind of explain the first few months and why 4-month sleep regression is a myth. Infant cycles are 50 minutes average, not, all. Some have longer, some have shorter, but about 50 minutes. And adults have like an hour and a half to 110 minutes average. So light sleep is sleep stage 1 and stage 2. Deep sleep is stage 3 and stage 4. Babies go to sleep, they just fall asleep in REM. We all know if we have a newborn consult, you have a sneaky little window in there when they're awake and then they fall asleep again. I do 90-minute, like an hour to 90-minute consults in people's homes. So I know when I go, they'll say, well, should I hold off? No, definitely nurse them. I mean, they're going to wake up again and nurse while I'm there. So go ahead and nurse them. I'm on the way. I'll be there at this time. Maybe baby's asleep. They wake up and they nurse and then they fall back asleep. And then we do a lot of chatting and then they nurse again. And it's like, I have such an easy baby. I'm like, this is the honeymoon period. Things get a little more active when your baby gets a little older. And then 2 to 3 months, they start to have that stage 1, stage 2 lighter sleep. So when we get to stage 4, or 3 or 4 months, when we get to 3 or 4 months, babies start to go to sleep in that non-REM, that lighter sleep. And they also have those cycles kind of starting to change and move around. So they actually wake up a little bit more because they're in a different sleep. They're not just going into deep REM sleep. And it's really good. I tell parents like, hey, I know they're waking up more, but that's a really good sign that their neurobiology is changing, right? It changes. Babies' sudden infant death risk is really strong the first 4 months. And then we know between 4 and 6 months, the risk factors start to get a little better. And then we know after 6 months, they start to get a little better, and so on and so on. So I think that's really an important thing. So stop saying sleep regression if possible and start teaching about, hey, this is a good sign that your baby's biology and neurology is working well. These slides I have here about flat head because we talk about sleeping on your back, right? Baby's back. And a lot of babies are laying flat on their back a lot. Some babies are literally going from crib to car seat to stroller to car seat to playpen to crib. And it's really important for parents to know, hey, it's okay to hold your baby. It's okay to try tummy time on your lap. It's okay to change positions. It's not just okay, it's encouraged. So changing positions can really help. And when we see these different head shapes, we need to understand that that's going to impact jaw and palate, right? And we know when babies come out of the birth canal and they're born, their heads are in different shapes, and that kind of changes over time. When we're holding our baby, they just naturally start to round up and change and grow normally over time, right? They're meant to change. But when we have babies laying flat all day, that puts extra pressure and changes and impacts how the head shapes over time. So plagiocephaly, brachycephaly, and dolichocephaly. Helmets are not the first thing to be encouraged. Helmets are the last thing, and then of course surgery for different things. So 2 things that impact, and that's why I said helmets, because somebody put it in the chat, but I will talk about the different ideas. So one thing is that Having that flat head impacts the neck muscle and torticollis, right? So tipping the ear to one side and their face kind of to the opposite side, that, and the facial and bone muscles can be tighter or onto one side, right? Or they might actually have trouble breastfeeding on one side because of their jaw and neck muscles kind of, right? They're connected. So it's impacting how they're feeding. So especially when you have a parent who says they're breastfeeding on one side, fine, but not the other side, consider asking about torticollis. I have a lot of parents, since I'm seeing them later, I'm not in the hospital, I'm seeing them at week 2, week 7, week 9, 8 months, a year, different reasons. I'll say, hey, just scroll through your photos, because we might not know right then and there, but if every photo has baby looking to the left in every photo, hey, let's talk to your doctor about why that's happening. Because it might happen from, like I said, birth, but when it's happening and not getting supported, then we have more problems. Signs and symptoms, that facial asymmetry, the jaw can be uneven and that impacts feeding. The jaw can appear more forward or flattened on one side. Obviously, it can impact feeding on both breast and bottle and impact breathing at night and sleeping. And we do see when you're coming into starting solids, trouble transitioning with different textures and solids. And obviously, there's a lot of other reasons for that, but flat head really impacts feeding. So I think that's really an important topic. And remember, when you have those, as lactation consultants, we're not just giving tips on tummy time. We're referring to PT and OT and speech. So positional plagiocephaly, that flathead syndrome, there's ways to prevent it or encourage changes, and there's treatments. So first of all, obviously reducing time in the swings and the carriers and the seats, like the buckets and the different things. It's not like you can't put a baby down to take a shower. We're not saying you must hold a baby all day long, but we're reminding parents that if they lay flat at night and then lay flat in the day, they're not getting to change their heads around. I always encourage parents, if they're using a crib or a bassinet, to put a blankie where the feet were, and then the next time put the head where that was, like alternate. Because then the baby will look at whatever's over there this time and then whatever's over there this time. Variety of sleep positions if you are allowing free movement. In other words, a baby has both their hands free and their legs are wiggly, they can move around and change their heads around. They're not having that, like you saw in the SNU picture. This is not a peer review article, but something I read in the hospital is why I bought helmets. Oh yeah, definitely. But when a baby's not moving, like we'll go back to this slide here, that Snoop slide, this baby can't turn their head at all, really. You have to make sure they can move their heads around. Sorry, going back. Reducing swaddles, and I'm going to talk again, like I said, about swaddles. Obviously, cuddle time in baby carriers or baby wearing. And then obviously we lay them face up to sleep and alternate sides for feeding, right? Either with bottle or breastfeeding. I do talk to parents about, if they're bottle feeding, for example, to make sure that they alternate sides for their own bodies so they don't get kind of a stiff shoulder, arms on one side. And then also so that the baby has that eye-hand coordination going on both sides where they can see from here to here, right? This is about how far a baby can see. So we want to make sure they're using both of their sides of their face. And then referring to physical therapy, occupational therapy, and yes, speech therapy sometimes, and also variety, making sure babies' sleep positions are alternating. And then, yes, headbands and helmets when really you can't, when these other things are not going to help, when it's past the point of these, the first side of this slide here. And then there is medical surgery that happens for some babies if it's really, really past that time. If they've been, say, ill for months or something going on where they're not being able to be held at all, or as much as they could be. So, and I know that's a little bit. So brain break number 1. Woo, stretch in your seat, get a drink. I'm going to have a drink. That's my cat napping in the sun. And I think, you know, there's a lot of slides, so we're going to dig in deep with something else. So I just want to take a little brain break. I have my electrolytes in my water here. Okay. Safe for infant sleep. And there's a lot that we have, like Sarah said, we have the birth outcomes for South Carolina, and they have a sleep group. We have a lot of discussions here. South Carolina, the Later League of Charleston had a long time ago, we had Linda Smith here. South Carolina Breastfeeding Coalition has had James McKenna here. So these are all some wonderful resources. And I just want to point out these slides. I will tell you where I got the images at the end because I have a whole link, but these are really important to share with parents what safer sleep looks like. Bed sharing promotes breastfeeding initiation, promotes breastfeeding duration, promotes breastfeeding exclusivity. It promotes both parents and babies' physical health and mental health. Like we talked about, breastfeeding and co-sleeping can really encourage parents to get a little bit more rest. And I think it's really important to talk about the safety when parents are breastfeeding. So I don't go into, obviously, like I said, I go into homes. So I'm not there telling people how to sleep, but I am going in and saying, well, where's baby sleeping? Can we talk about that? Safe Sleep 7, that's from Sweet Sleep. I have this completely referenced. I love this. So no smoking. And I do now ask on my health forms. I used to only ask, like, do they smoke? Now I ask, you know, smoking, vaping, THC. Sober and not impaired. So that's where that THC comes in. But also, you know, anything that is a medication that's going to impact whether the parent is sleepy is important to not bed share. Breastfeeding at day at night. And that is not, you know, there's a lot of questions we now have about, does breastfeeding mean breastfeeding, or does it mean human milk feeding? And what I talk about when I talk about that is the baby breast focused? So are they going to turn towards the breast at night where they are kind of not going to crawl off the bed or do something where they're looking for food somewhere, versus are they breast focused? Healthy full-term baby on their back, face up, no sweat, no swaddle. And this is a new infographic. The old infographic said, I think, no swaddling, but didn't say no sweat, no swaddle. And I think that's, you know, the overheating part. And a safe surface. And Dr. James McKenna has on his website a lot of information on testing your mattress out for sleep. He has a YouTube video on it, talks about baby on their back, where the head is, keeping the pillow. Like I said, on this slide, you can kind of see the pillow is kind of above the parent's arm, and they make that kind of cuddle curl. And talks about unmedicated and all the different things to think about, including that breast focused and breast sleeping. And I'm assuming most of y'all have heard the term breast sleeping. Okay. So American Academy of Pediatric Guidance changed in 2022, actually added a couple of things to their guidance. And obviously supervised tummy time, and it does talk about no cardiorespiratory. Love it, Christina. Breast sleeping 100%. Love it. I'm so happy you're here on this call. Anyway, so not using those cardiorespiratory monitors. Now, there are some babies who are maybe preemies or have real medical issues, and that's where you use that monitor because it is prescribed by your doctor, by your pediatrician or your neonatologist. But otherwise, not every parent needs a little outlet and all those little things, because what happens is it kind of gives that false sense of security. They're not really nearby. Sleep sacks. Why was sleep sacks so popular? Are sleep sacks safe while bed sharing? What about James McKenna? Take care. Majority of breastfed babies take bottles at least sometimes. Yes. And that's where that, so back to that question, Amelia, is the breast focused. Yes, a lot of babies have breast feeding sometimes and bottle feeding sometimes, but are they breast focused? So a baby who has a bottle once a day but is still breast focused is different than a baby who has 8 of their 9 feedings at the breast or the bottle directly, if that makes sense. And obviously parents have to weigh in their own risk benefit there. So we talk a lot about risk, risk tolerance. Like we've all heard that term lately, risk tolerance. So got it. Awesome. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has something about that. And then they also have not sitting in an upright device. So if it's more than 10% incline, their little necks are going to go down. And so when I come into a house, maybe of twins, and the babies are both sleeping in car seats, we do talk about elevating that backside and moving up or finding a safer sleep surface, putting the 2 babies together in a bassinet head to head, or some other kind of safety around what's the best option in their homes, right? And I'm lucky enough to be in homes. When you're in the hospital, just talking about safe sleep. And when we talk about the sleep sacks, if you're going to be using a sleep sack, if you're going to co-sleep, it really needs to be a light material. But even if you're in a bed, they say they don't recommend swaddling, weighted blankets, weighted clothing, those big, thick blankets that people are putting on babies that are heavy, that weigh them down, that impede mobility, right? Because we want to make sure they're safe and they don't overheat. And so I just added all those, and I love these little pictures because it doesn't mean you can't be close or connected to your baby just because you're not co-sleeping. Parents sleep in all sorts of arrangements that work for them. And sometimes the parents so worry about rolling over on their baby or can't sleep with the baby in the bed, but it's really important to stay in the same room as much as possible, or as close as possible to that. Okay. So we're about an hour in, and we have another hour to go. And some of that will just be discussion, not just not about there. So United States Federal Safe Sleep for Babies Act came about in 2021, and it was effective as of last fall. It is unlawful to create, manufacture, distribute any of these little contraptions that elevate babies and they're inclined, and they call them sleepers, and they have all been banned in the United States. And so if you see these at garage sales or you're passing them down from friend to friend, be aware that these have been completely banned for safety reasons. Also, things that go in cribs, like crib bumpers, material that goes in cribs, it has to be mesh. Their crib bumpers are basically banned in the United States now, the padded ones. Anything that would go inside between the crib and the baby or the mattress, all of those things are finally all banned. And you will still see a lot of images on social media and online and even in advertisements. I kind of screenshotted one from a local store here selling cribs with like the bumpers, really thick bumpers, and a toy in the crib. And, there's a lot of unsafe practices and images out there. Anybody here working in the hospital? AAP says wait for a pacifier 1 month. I recommend 4 to 6 months or never, because the first 6 weeks are so important in establishing supply. Bottle feeding, I suggest slow flow nipple and pace bottle feeding, intuitive bottle feeding. Yes, love you, Christina. That's what I love about you. So yes, absolutely. And I do have a slide on that, but I love it. So when people that work in the hospital, anybody working in a hospital, I think the number one thing I would love to see stop is people doing prenatal classes or hospital work with teaching how to swaddle. And just letting parents do skin to skin and cuddling, because I was even asking my husband about this. You know, we really didn't swaddle much, but I said, do you remember back when we had, you know, our daughter, did we have somebody? And he's like, yeah, I remember the nurse teaching me how to swaddle when she was born. And I remember unswaddling her and breastfeeding, and then the nurse coming in and swaddling her, and then I'd unswaddle her and breastfeed. And then I had my son second in the hospital. I had my third at home, Zachary. So, but it's still being taught in a lot of parenting classes, in a lot of prenatal classes. And, you know, what's much safer is to not swaddle. So swaddling at birth delays initial breastfeeding. It can impact successful suckling, reduce intake of breast milk, and lead to greater weight loss compared to unswaddled babies. Swaddling visually obscures feeding cues, reduces crying, therefore eliminating 2 key factors prompting typical parents, right, or carers. So what that means is parents will go, well, oh, reduces crying, it must calm my baby, but also it impacts cues, right? That dysregulation that we talked about, that I said keep in mind. It's really important to do skin to skin and let babies have their hands and feet mouth free. My daughter got very angry when I got her a pacifier. She never accepted them. I think it's nothing ever came out of it. Oh yeah. Like, you know, there's pros and cons, and I think I do have a slide on pacifier use too. So swaddling. Let's go back here. Okay. Another risk factor, and the AAP says do not swaddle after 2 months of age. So I see a lot of the resources and books saying to swaddle for a long time, but the AAP does have their guidance updated to say do not swaddle if baby can roll over or past 2 months of age. And there's risks of SIDS and unintentional suffocation when babies are swaddled and placed on their stomach. And we see that when, you know, hopefully most child care centers now don't put babies on their tummies, but sometimes, you know, it's parents' first day back at work and the carer puts them down on their tummy. We've had incidences like that. So really talking about swaddling only happening when in the presence of an adult who's monitoring them. And we all know, you know, breathing and airway clear, you know, things from importance of that. So swaddling can impact feeding. I do think there's pros and cons to it. You know, if you have a very high needs sensory baby and you can't calm them and you just need them to have some, you know, calming down, but even swaddling them while you rock and then unswaddling when you lay them down can really help. So thinking about different pros and cons to it, rather than it being something that we do to every baby, we think about it as a tool in the toolbox for some babies. It can really impact, obviously we know it does raise SIDS risk. It reduces skin to skin. It's really unsafe for co-sleeping. We do not want to swaddle and co-sleep. It reduces feeding frequency, and the decreasing the baby's arousal is what leads to SIDS risk. And some of the sleep training books and sleep blogs and sleep, you know, webinars and sleep podcasts that I listen to, a lot of them suggest swaddling and double swaddling, which causes a lot of overheating. Amanda says she was a 36-weeker at home. I think it's important we educate to stop because we're strongly swaddling for temperature. Yeah. And the thing is, temperature, body, if you put a baby skin to skin, parents' body's going to help regulate temperature. They're going to co-regulate. And what's better than putting baby here? You don't have to be naked. You can wear a low-cut tank top or something, put baby here and cover you up together. And that really is protective of temperature. Yeah. And don't should all over yourselves. If you're hearing news that you did something and you feel like, oh no, I did that. You're not, you know, we all do the best we can in the moment. I have made 1,000 million mistakes. I get up the next day and try to parent again. You know, mornings with teenagers are just as hard as mornings with newborns. And, you know, my day goes on and I just keep trying to trying to have that relationship with my kiddos. So please do not think this is like a judgment thing or, you know, oh, we should have, could have, would have. Don't shoot all over yourself. Okay. So the question about sleep sex came up. There is safe sleep and childcare. Yeah. So Tia said there's a safe sleep and childcare initiative in South Carolina. I will say that that's wonderful. Send me some information about it. I'll definitely share it and send it to Romaine, our social media chair for South Carolina Breastfeeding Coalition, because she can spread that around to everyone. Because I think the more the merrier. If we can get parents actually at the social media really works, right? It's rapid fire, instant, right? We can get some bad stuff going out, gossip that's not true, but we can also spread a lot of great info on social media. With safe for sleep and swaddling, we want to think about arms free, face up, light blanket or sack like this. Their hips need to be not straight. We have a lot of parents swaddling with their hips straight, which obviously hip dysplasia is an issue. In the parent's line of sight, stop by 2 months old, stop if the baby rolls over before 2 months old, because we do have those super babies out there, and swaddle with the babies in their own bed. Okay. Pacifier tree. And I see this childcare. Yes, Tia. Absolutely. Both parents and caregivers have to be on the same page. Yes. Okay. So pacifiers, when we talk about pacifiers, it's kind of, you know, some parents are using them, some parents aren't. We do want to avoid them for the first month if possible. But there's a lot of times I'm in a home with a 2-week-old or 3-week-old and there's a passy. So we talk about it. Okay. I'm not there to tell parents that it's something they should or shouldn't do, but like swaddling, we need to think about it as a tool in the toolbox and not something every baby does or uses. Babies don't need to suck on pacifiers at all. They just need non-nutritive, comforting sucking, right? So if we think about it in terms of sleep and feeding, the AAP does suggest using a pacifier at night for safe sleep, but that's also age appropriate sizes. It's a million dollar, I think $26 million industry at this point for pacifiers in America. And so it's being marketed heavily. There's tons of brands, but thinking in terms of safety, is it all one piece, one material all throughout, nothing that can break apart? Is it, you know, the age appropriate, it's not a newborn one in a bigger mouth where they're going to take it in their mouth, right? Is it so size matching? And then comfort, for example, if you're having a bottle fed baby, they need to comfort suck in between. Feeding, talking about frequency. So we do know there's research out there that shows that pacifier use limit cuts at least one feeding a day out of the equation. So babies are missing at least one feeding a day average. Because if we put the pacifier in first instead of offering food and, you know, at the breast or whatever, then we're missing a feeding. And then oral motor, you know, stopping by a certain age. A lot of the studies I was reading for this were pacifier use, talking about palate changes, teeth changes, narrowing of palate. But that also is, a lot of the studies were on extended pacifier use, like over a year, over 2 years, over 3 years. So just kind of having parents do that weigh in of limiting to when they need it. Like when the baby's crying in the car, it would be cruel to not give them something to comfort. We're not talking about not letting, I used to hold my hand and kind of stick it in the back. I ended up with like a really sore shoulder because I was constantly putting my finger in baby's mouth while I was driving. So my kiddos didn't take pacifiers, but I see a lot of parents who do. So let's see. Brain break number 2. Woo, we made it. It's these are some things in my garden. That's my garden. That was a raised bed that I just took the wood out of. And the other one is just a steel container that I recently planted last weekend when I was working on these talks. I took a little brain break and did some planting. So take a little brain break, drink a little water, and get back to it. Okay. So again, I really love this book. And if you all have any other books that you love that you think are great, definitely throw them in the chat. I'm going to talk about some that I don't love, and it's okay to kind of talk about that. So, all right. And again, with safe sleep, it's talking about risk tolerance, Okay. The next part is I want to talk about where our sleep history, the psychology, and the advice is coming from, right? First of all, these are people in first wave behaviorism and psychology. I am not a psychologist. Spanish. Oh, thank you. I love it. I will look it up. Everybody, Veronica. Okay. So first wave behaviorism, take a look at those guys. It's almost 100 years old. It's, we talk about, for example, different cried out methods that are, they might work in the short term, but then they actually create worse problems later on, or they cause missed feeding cues or missed needs, missed comfort needs. The methods that are kind of training out biology, training out normal. So when these came about, it was war, the Great Depression, institutional, a lot of institutional and factory type thinking, and all, white male centric thinking and values. So I think that's important to understand that a lot of the advice that we use today is from almost 100 years ago. And the thing is, with that longevity, there must be some things that are working or they wouldn't be getting passed on. But then there's other things that are really, it's time to weed out. Okay. So first wave advice kind of talks about, they have this responsive and gentle language, but they're still based on that idea of overriding, ignoring, or delaying responses. So they're saying like delay a response, override a response, or ignore a response, right? And so that is that dysregulation of communication that I asked you to hold into your minds. And then it also talks about overriding biological cues, that sleep-wake homeostasis, that hormones, babies don't have these hormones till, like I said, they start coming in around 4 to 6 months where they start building their own. And sleep is based on that hormonal homeostasis. And it is based on the clock of the sun, the sunshine outside, the circadian rhythm of our day. So those are the two things that all of us have for sleep, that homeostasis of that hormone regulation and getting outside in the sun. And the advice really kind of impedes that. Second wave behaviorism is kind of when I was born in 1971. So it was really popular in the 70s, started coming about in the 70s. It wasn't really popular to the 90s and early 2000s, actually, but it kind of started in that focus of thinking about our thoughts, thinking about thinking, information processing, which is great. But there was kind of a focus on positivity and not having negative things. It's all undesirable to be negative, right? Toxic positivity is what it really was, right? And then third wave behaviorism, the 90s to today, is kind of changing. Acceptance theories, holistic approaches to therapy, allowing emotions. It's emotional, it's individualized care. It's more about typical development and biology and like how we are as humans. And there's a lot of mindfulness involved. Some women have started to come into it, but it's still not that diverse, right? We have a lot to go with how we look at psychology and infant care. I have this word adultism up here because I want you to think about, there's a lot of isms that we need to consider, but a lot of the approaches are only thinking about the adult and then not looking at the whole dyad. Who gives up what? Who's got the most stake? Who's valued and honored the most? So, sleep training buzzwords. Now, I don't have judgment up here. These are not in any order, but I think what's important is a lot of these words like anchor feeding, graduated extinction, independent sleep, eat, play, sleep, lazy or manipulative babies. These are words that are coming in from sleep training into lactation plans and lactation care. And it's time to throw a lot of them out. I get some of them, anchor feeding. I don't love the idea of having an anchor feed, making sure you do that every day. But, when I went back to work, when I was a teacher, we got our daughter up at a certain time. I nursed, and then dad fed her, and I drove to work earlier so I could get her earlier, and dad could work later, right? So we had to wake her up at a certain time. I didn't know it was called anchor feeding. It was just what time I had to get her up every day, right? So the natural rhythm of my life. It wasn't like I had to do it or I had to follow it or I felt compelled by some book to do it. It was just what I did, right? And then I did eventually stay home with my second and my third and volunteered a lot, but it's not working. So I had the flexibility and availability to kind of do things differently because I had that freedom that other people don't have. So, but there's a lot of ideas like cry it out and things like chair method, that tell parents sit in a chair next to your baby, but don't touch your baby, like limit how many minutes you're allowed to make eye contact. Like it's very rigid, thinking, and parents really do have their baby's best interest in mind, and they're trying to do the best they can. But a lot of these programs cause a lot of dysregulation between parents and infants, and also a lot of anxiety for parents. And some of them are very dangerous, like tight swaddling or letting your babies cry till they vomit. I mean, we need to think about whether they're safe or not too. Okay. Why educate about sleep training when we're doing a consult on lactation? You don't have to use the word sleep training or use these buzzwords, but just encouraging that families want to do the best they can. They really want to know how things really work. And if they have that, then they can make plans that work for them. Parents really feel like they're doing something wrong. They really have a lot of shame, anxiety, confusion. They're concerned about normal infant development, which is why teaching about milestones or just kind of incorporating a little bit of milestone info in is important. And, parents, a lot of these apps and logs give a lot of false promises and cause more exhaustion for parents and babies. And then, imagine waking up a baby in a deep sleep just because it's 3 o'clock or, then they don't get that full sleep, and then or putting them down at a certain time when they're hungry. It's not really helping the children either. And a lot of times what I might get is maybe a 5 or 6 month old kiddo that the parents call me about and say the baby suddenly lost a lot of weight. And of course we talk about, at 0 to 4 months, they gain this much. At 4 to 6 months, they gain this month. Gain naturally slows, but suddenly they start losing. And I go, what's going on? Oh, you're starting to read this 12 weeks sleep book or whatever. Can we talk about here what's some good info in there and what's not accurate? Do you think some of these terms are just capitalist rewriting normal behavior? Yeah, anchor feeding. Things that parents would figure out. They do. I think the listen to the expert versus listening to the baby thing is a real thing. I am a lactation consultant, but I go to parents as a parent too, because I think that's what I love about when and still do volunteer with the Leche League is, it's parent centered. It's like, hey, parents are the experts on their own children. So critical questions about unhelpful sleep advice is, I think, thinking about if it's blaming the child, right? Like pitting parents against children, telling people that children are manipulative, for example. Extreme ideas about holding their children, like saying, well, you're only allowed to hold your child at this time of day. That kind of stuff, I've read that in some books that were about the 1920s, and they came about from doctors and outside sources telling women not to hold their babies or whatever. And that's still today. It's so prevalent in the sleep training apps and blogs and things. Thinking about if it impacts milk supply or infant growth. Those are two big factors that parents are calling us about. And if it's random, like I said, if you wake up a baby from a deep sleep versus just looking at your baby and letting them have some rest, right? If it impacts the relationship and if it's balancing parent and infant need. So, so schedules. I have a lot of parents I go to and I'm visiting their house and they're on that 12-3-6-9 schedule because they went to a center or a hospital or a doctor who has them on schedule. But there's also some babies who have to be on that schedule. They're maybe they were in a NICU under medical issues, surgeries, NG feeding. There's a lot of reasons. Schedules can take out some of the mental load for parents who are stressing and really anxious about things. It's very predictable, but it's very strict. There's a lot of, it does, obviously, we all know who are working in lactation that the longer you spread out feeding times, that feedback inhibitor letdown happens and it slows production of milk. So we need to think about if we're encouraging or discouraging normal, healthy milk supply issues. And then there are studies that say these strict schedules impact mental health. These are some of the examples that I found online. So I signed up for the Huckleberry sleep app. There's another one called Napster. There's a whole bunch, and I signed up for a bunch of the different apps and blogs. Moms on Call is a huge one. They have an app, a blog, a podcast, a book, so many resources. And a lot of parents that I work with are using that one. And I think the main thing I want you to notice about these is there is a huge jump in time. For example, it says 10 o'clock bedtime, 7 a.m. wake time. And that's just a 1 to 4 week old sleeping from 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning. That's just so unrealistic. I mean, imagine the amount of stress a parent feels thinking they're doing something wrong because their baby's not sleeping from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I mean, their blood sugar, there's so many challenges for a 1 to 4 week old being put on a schedule. This 4 to 8 week schedule for Moms on Call, the person who put this schedule out and the book are a little different, but the schedule here is based on the blog and the book, but they also do say they added in like a potential 2 a.m. feed, but usually they're expecting babies to sleep from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Again, that same huge chunk of time. It's expecting that, if we go back to that chart that I showed earlier, consecutive blocks of hours and hours of sleep. That's not truly happening. What happens is fragmented sleep. And the Huckleberry one talks about every time that the kiddo should nap, scheduling 6 naps in a day. A newborn just falls asleep on and off. A 1-month-old they start to have a rhythm of the day where they fall up and awake. So when do parents have time to pump, especially if you have a parent who's calling you when they're triple feeding? When do they get to just relax, eat, breathe, enjoy their baby? So, but also it does, again, like I said, it takes out some of the stress and the mental load when they have some type of schedule. So encourage flexibility and grace with that. And then routines and rhythms, predictability and flexibility, right? Having, it's got some predictability. The morning, we're going to do this. We're going to have a playtime in the morning. In the midday, we're going to have a nursey together. In the afternoon, I'm going to read a book while my baby nurses. In the evening, I'm going to try to dim lights at a certain time. So it's a rhythm. And so usually parents are empowered by that to learn to trust their intuition and kind of follow their baby's cues and needs. But also, I think it's important to say also that if parents think they have to be strictly following a routine and do everything the same every single day in the same order, that's really hard too and kind of boring. I'm super ADHD, and to me, like, even paying attention for 2 hours, I have all my little things, even though I'm not playing with them. I like to move and groove. I don't like to do exactly the same thing and make sure I make dinner exactly the same time every day. So Infant classroom teachers know that rigid schedules don't work. Parents can learn quite a bit from folks who take care of infants. Yeah, they sure as heck can. I've done a lot of I've done a lot of work in daycares too. One of my jobs part-time was that for a little bit with mental health stuff in daycares. And man, there's some really awesome teachers out there. Strict schedules and ideas about robotic behavior seem like they can harm parent mental health and sleep deprivation. Yes, absolutely. And Amelia, that's absolutely true. So here is an article I found to share from 2014 talking about infant-led responses. And it says parent-led routines are linked to higher levels of reported anxiety in mothers. Parents who use books that promote strict schedules and routines lead to higher depression due to feelings of stress related to these books. So it's not that there's not grains of salt that work. Like I said, if the longevity of some of this information is 100 years old or more, but are they feeling trapped and chained down by these routines and schedules, or are they really feeling like they're getting what they need, and if it's working for them or not? Okay. I read a ton of books on sleep for this, and this one, when my kids were young, this one was hugely popular in my area here on Becoming Baby Wise. They now have like a 0 to 6 months, a 6-month one, a toddler one, a whole bunch. But AAP has had past warnings, especially on their original books. But there's just no accurate information on milk supply, infant feeding. It really discourages parents comforting their own children to sleep at all. Their books started with a schedule at 10 days old. So, I mean, you're barely just like out of the womb, you know? They encourage sleeping through the night at 8 to 12 weeks old. And really sleeping through the night, we used to talk about the studies originally were for 5 hours. And these ones are talking about, 8 to 12 hours, some of these books, which is, I don't sleep 12 hours. I wish some days I could get 12 hours, but I don't. I wake up pretty much the same time every day now. It encourages baby crying intervals, no matter what age or stage. There's not real age appropriate information in this book about how babies should be. There's a lot of adultism type things that don't trust infant biology, normal biology, and really stringent 3 to 4 hour feeding schedules. Moms on Call, general misunderstanding of milk supply, infant feeding cues. They suggest at 2 to 4 months, they say 5 to 7 times a day feeding. So there's no discussion on why babies breastfeed or nurse. They want to nurse because they're thirsty, they're hungry, they're cold, right? So limiting to 5 times is really going to impact feeding goals and milk supply and limit infant growth. They have a schedule that starts at 6 weeks and a schedule that starts at 4 months. And again, if you're using these schedules, I'm not here judging parents about using these schedules. I'm here to weigh in on helping parents understand the risk benefit. When a parent says, I'm using this book, I say, okay, I want to just let you know that please keep flexibility in mind with feeding. The schedule gives some great, there's some good tips on how to keep your life organized and scheduled. But there's also some things that are misinformation. So just if you have any questions about breastfeeding, here's some other resources. Here's a good book on, how milk supply works, etc. And say, just like you might call your doctor about, heart palpitations, and you might call the weatherman about the weather, right? We don't know. It's not an accurate feeding book or blog or post or podcast. Some of their stuff is accurate, but really risk benefit. It does talk a lot about swaddling. It talks about this like wheel that you're supposed to put your baby on, this Ferris wheel, but so like you're allowed to touch them and hold them as long as you're moving them, but not rocking them. And it's this fear-based kind of education that, oh, you must not make your baby need you because then you're going to get overwhelmed. But I mean, imagine how hard it is to like physically hold your baby like this instead of just rocking. I just think like it adds layers of jobs that you don't need to have. 12 hours by 12 weeks is just, you know, I mean, consecutive sleep, it's horrific to think that they're expecting these sleep times that are so long. 3 hours of sleep in the day and 12 at night is, you know, when do they eat, cuddle, interact, play if they're asleep for, you know, 12, 13, 14, 15 hours out of 24 consecutively. So again, going back to the chart that I showed earlier from this terrific book, right? There is that amount of time sleeping. Average baby might sleep 15 hours in a 24-hour period, but it's fragmented sleep. The baby whisperer and crib sheet I mentioned, the baby whisperer is as old as I am. You know, I mean, it's not 51 years old, but it's as old as my oldest daughter because I remember reading it before she was born and taking notes because I loved having that. I mean, my favorite places are when I was a teacher, I was so organized, and my favorite place was Staples. You know, I loved it. I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. We do this in a routine. It'll be perfect. And she didn't eat, play, sleep. She ate, she fell asleep. She ate, she pooped, she got diaper changed, she ate, she fell asleep, she woke up and ate. That's how babies are. They don't usually fall asleep from being in an active alert phase. They have to be sleepy and calm. And some babies you can kind of pat down to sleep and put them in their crib or wear them to sleep and then lay them down. And other babies need to be nursed and rocked and then go to sleep. And then crib sheet, it's not a book about sleep, but there's a chapter on sleep. And it basically just kind of says, here's the data and this is okay and sleep training's fine. But it really doesn't call out the flaws in the studies and kind of it doesn't question if they're right at all or if they're up to date or accurate or the design flaws in them. And then it kind of discusses, it does have one good thing. It does kind of talk about those 2, 3, 4 month changes and how many naps, kind of like the chart that I showed you. So it does have some pros and cons to that book. All right, we are an out. What is it? We started 12:30, 1:30. It's 2 o'clock now. So this is perfect. Family-centered solutions for your care plans for working with the dyad. Again, parents are the experts, empowering them, giving them up-to-date information, encouraging them to be collaborative in the plan, right? How they care about their child and how they feed their child and how they sleep for their child is something that we want to help them feel positive about. And if you're a parent on this call, just know that, you know, even from day one, the day your baby's born, you're in the hospital bed or at birth center or wherever, and you're the one that's spending already the most time with them. So you're already getting to know their noises, their feelings, their cues, their sounds. So critical thinking about encouraging cue feeding, responsive parenting in the day and night. That our plan should have respectful physical and emotional safety for both the parents and the children. That it should really correspond with parents' goals. If we're talking about a parent's goals, that's why they're calling us. They are our first client, obviously, but the baby's the second client. So does it impact normal infant growth development milestones? So are we doing something that encourages and promotes and protects lactation, or are we doing something that is discouraging to lactation? And when I think about the sources, like all the different books and blogs and resources I've read, I kind of think about the source. Who's giving that information? Is it somebody who's actually kind of read about infant sleep biology, or are they somebody who's just kind of giving advice because they care? I think most people give advice because they care, right? They're trying to help. But is it in line with the parents' goals and values? Is there some evidence for efficacy? Does it really work, right? If a lot of these advice things in sleep training books especially don't actually work. So it's just adding more layers of stress for the family. And then, of course, infant outcomes like growth and development and mental health are important. Going back to sweet sleep, I think it's important to just talk a few minutes about infant temperaments. I think I'm pretty good on time, so we're almost done. And I think so, if in my home, I have 5 of us, right? My daughter's at college right now. My son's in high school. My other son's in middle school. But at one point I had an elementary school, a preschooler, and a baby. At one point I had 2 preschoolers and a little infant, and so on. So my partner and I and my 3 kids all have different temperaments. We all have different needs for different activity levels. My first was a very wiggly baby. My third would just sink into me. Zachary, he was just like a snuggle bug. My Samuel would just, I used to say like he's a little hot potato, right? He wanted to snuggle. They were all different in activity levels. Rhythmicity means like how much predictability you need. I need a lot of change, but I feel calmer when I know what to expect in my day. Reactions to new situations. Some people can really manage something new, going to a different place, a new doctor, a new car smell, whatever it is. Mood is kind of, how much mood and comfort you need, but also, general mood. Like, does a baby wake up content every day? Or do they some babies just wake up screaming, 0 to 60, right? And how parents and kids can kind of co-regulate, if you've heard that word before, as we talked about it. And then kind of distractibility. Can you sit and kind of nurse everywhere? We know 3 to 5 month old, they start to get really active and more alert. So maybe a 2 month old can just nurse everywhere, and a 9 month old pops on and off all day, right? They get distracted. That's normal, but is there a outside the normal range too? Or can they focus? Or what can you do for helping parents kind of get into maybe a darker room or quiet things down? Some families, just different persistent levels, like how long they can attend and keep trying, right? If we say like, you go into a home and we're talking about trying to help a baby latch, and, they need only a few minutes at a time to work on that. And then they need breaks. And then we try again when they're calmer. And then we do something else, or we let them nap, and then we try again. Versus some babies can just keep trying. They can just keep trying. They just don't give up. They just keep bopping around, right? Kind of watch their persistence. Sensitivity, that can be a lot of things: sounds, texture, environment, emotional sensitivity. So allergies can come into play with like babies who are like having an allergy. And then intensity, I am a super spicy, spicy person, and my kids are spicy spirited kiddos. And if we're all spicy, like who calms everyone down? So thinking about states of being for everyone and help, like that includes sleep, right? These all include sleep temperaments as well. Like I like to be nice, calm, quiet, flat sheets. Somebody else might be able to sleep on a pile of laundry, right? Infant cues, that's obviously important for teaching. I think we all kind of know this, but this is important to understand that, for example, one of the books I was reading talked about, it was great. It was from a lactation consultant talking about feeding and sleep, right? She wrote a book about it. I read it. Great info on feeding in some parts, and then some parts that just didn't match or line up, right? Talking about feed your baby frequently, but don't let them snack. So how do you know what a full feeding is versus a snack, right? Babies have a lot of different reasons to nurse. They want to, obviously, just that normal need to suck, right? That's helping them. That's forming comfort and connection, and but also hunger and thirst, right? I live in South Carolina. It's pretty warm today. It's in the 80s. In the winter, in a lot of places, it's cooler, but the air is very dry. You get extra thirsty. They wake up and they cry because they're wet or dirty. They want to be changed and then nurse. There's a lot of reasons to consider. So helping parents understand that sucking is comfort. Suckling at the breast is comfort. It's helps with pain, so many things. Okay. There are outside the normal range, right? We can't expect that every parent is going to be like, oh yeah, my baby wakes up every 10 minutes night and day. That's not normal, right? So, or, okay, I'm letting my baby sleep. My baby is sleeping 13 hours in a row, right? That's kind of concerning too. So we obviously look at growth and gains. We use the World Health Organization's growth charts. We look at wet diapers and poopy diapers, poopy being yellow. So we kind of look at that progression from the meconium to the brownish green to the yellow. And then obviously if they're combo feeding, those diapers are going to look different, maybe yellowish brown. If they're combo feeding, if they're transitioning from formula back to breast milk, it might start looking a little looser. So we talk to them about what to expect. And then also the parent, right? Hopefully all of y'all are doing that GAD-7 and Edinburgh screening tools and talking about depression and anxiety. And then I think a big piece of some of the studies was about when you have a co-parent, whether that co-parent is helping and sharing tasks, right? If it's all on one parent, that can be really exhausting. So figuring out they figure out really, I'm not going in and telling parents what to do or how to run their lives, but helping them know that, hey, sharing some tasks, like maybe it's heavy on baby duty for one parent, so it might be heavy on laundry and dishes duty for the other parent, but you're both doing a lot of work kind of thing. And then support should align with their values. So care plans for parents, normal rest, outsourcing if possible, meal plans, kind of reminding parents that normal development. Care plans for infant, kind of making sure we respond to children night and day, kind of responding to them. It doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean instantly responding every single time, but responding with affection, connection. If you're separated for work or school, reconnecting and knowing that parenting is kind of not just about those tasks, but about that connection. So the dyad is, obviously schedule time outside for sleeping. That's important to have that circadian rhythm, right? Social time, getting some connection, whether it be on the internet, with a friend, FaceTiming someone, encouraging social connection, planning for rest. When I travel or whatever, I plan rest days in between. And I plan breaks before, like I'll finish here at 3 and then I'm going to plan a consult, but I have an hour break, right? Encouraging gentle massage, ruling out feeding in medical issues, and starting simple and building helps. Coming up with a plan of 12 things to do at once is way overwhelming, but saying, can we add one more pumping a day, right? What do you think is a reasonable amount of time you can do tummy time and play with your little one today, whatever it might be. 2 care plans that I have in every care plan. So all of my care plans with parents are individual, but there's 2 things I always have. One is this quote about sleep. Sleep and infant growth and milk production are interdependent. And I have that basis link for parents. And then the second part is either I say something like feed infant at XY times in 24 hours, including at night 2 times or whatever. So for my 6 month and up, I say including at least 1 time a night, but this is more what my plans would usually have is something about feeding 10 to 12 times if they're a newborn, at least including twice a night, or if they have oversupply, I might say 8 to 12 times a night. And we do know that research now says even 16 times a night, 16 times in 24 hours is more likely. And I do have that there 11, 12, 13, 14 times, right? Or minus, right? 11, 10, 9, 8. So just a little quick slide on nighttime help. In my area, there are parents who have night nurses, doulas, night nannies, friends come over, co-parents, a lot of different things, right, coming in. So thinking about, is the nighttime help helping with the goals? Is it supporting the infant and parent bond? Is it supporting the infant, the parent skills on using their own instincts? And so things like if the person is coming in there and they're taking care of the baby all night, is the parent able to pump and leave a bottle? Like I have some that are where they'll take care of the baby all night, but the parent pumps somewhere during the night, puts it out and the stairs, but they're exclusively pumping, right? But then if they're able to directly breastfeed, what about bringing the baby to the mom or dad, whatever, whoever is parenting and taking care of the baby? They can do a paste bottle, or they can breastfeed directly and then go back to the carer that's there for the night, right? Or the carer for the night can do other tasks and just keep the baby in a little bassinet in the living room while they fold laundry or whatever they're doing at night, and then bring the baby. This makes me think nighttime help may be useful when one parent works at night. Yeah. I mean, when one parent works at night, there is sometimes that when a baby's sleeping longer, they're only needing a little bit of care at night, and then the parents are nursing and doing activities during the day. But then when does the parent rest, right? The nighttime, when you work overnight, I've had a few friends and clients that, you know, have nighttime working, especially nurses and things like that. So just thinking if it's in line with the parents' values and really supporting those goals, those two things that we talked about. Because there's some great doulas and night folks out there. And then there's some that are really sabotaging. So, all right, resources, because we are pretty much there. I put some of my favorite authors. Obviously, I can't say enough about some of these books I've showed you. I love them. If you are a family or working in IBCLC work or lactation or doula or WIC or doing anything with little ones, preschools, nannies, these are great resources, especially the family sleep books. Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine has a protocol on sleep. It's about 12 pages. You can download it. 12 pages, but a few of the pages are just resources for different research out there, and talks about bread sharing. Can I backtrack the first slide of books? Yeah, so that was like the one with the picture. That is Lindsay Hookway's book, Sarah Ockwell Smith, James McKenna, Kathleen Kendall Jackett. So I can show you some of the books I have over here that I love. Okay. Oh my gosh. No Cry Naps. No Cry for Toddlers and Preschoolers. James McKenna Safe Sleep. Love Lucy Riddle's books. Lucy Riddle, she has Breastfeeding Myths books. Booster Breast Milk. Oh my gosh, one of my faves. Alicia Simpson. She was a LeLache League leader, an IBCLC, a nutritionist. Fabulous. Wendy Middlemiss and Kathleen Kendall Tackett. Wendy Middlemiss's research is amazing. So this is an older book that I didn't include, but yeah, it's fallen over. And then you know, when I was a new mom, the baby sleep book and Dr. Sears books were my go-tos. I'm really grateful I found the baby books from Dr. Sears. They helped me in my parenting for sure. Basis Sleep app, I think, is really important. I love this app. It is just fabulous. It's free. The website's free. It's a UK-based app, but it's the only app I suggest to parents. And some of the links are broken on the app, but basically it's the same information that's on their website. Dr. McKenna, obviously, we love him. I know everybody here is just, we're all fans. Dr. McKenna, Dr. James McKenna's work. I've gone to a few of his conferences now, one in Georgia and then one here for South Carolina Breastfeeding Coalition. His books and researches are amazing. We've had, well, not we, because I'm not volunteering for Coalition anymore, but I feel like I still am part of Coalition, a member, and have been on South Carolina Breastfeeding Coalition, like I said, for over a decade. So we have had South Carolina Infant Mental Health Association come and speak to us about infant care and infant needs. And I love this guide that you can share with parents, bonding with your baby. South Carolina, like I said, when we talk about the torticollis and the flat head and different things out there, it's BabyNet and First 5. These are resources for local South Carolinians. But, you know, understanding that parents can self-refer And they don't need, if their doctor's saying, well, you can wait another year for OT. No, like the sooner the better. Like it's okay to encourage parents. It doesn't mean that your child has, for example, special needs. It just means that these are, you know, BabyNet has free OT and PT resources. I mean, this is so important to know about. Healthychildren.org is the American Academy of Pediatrics parent-facing website. So we have like the professional side and the parent-facing side, and these are just like parent-friendly resources. And is your baby hungry or full? Responsive feeding explained. They have an image, like an infographic. They used to have a really good video, but they took it down for some reason. UK baby friendly. So United States baby friendly and UK baby friendly are different. I think that is something to do with, as Amelia said, capitalism, right? United States, we don't have parent leave in a lot of places. There's a lot of different things, but UK baby friendly has in their responsive feeding as in part of their steps and plans. And they have a really good video on, it's 7 years old, but it still talks about that breastfeeding relationship building on YouTube. And they have some really good resources on relationship building and responsive feeding, and then caring for your baby at night that are easy to download for professionals or parents. Facebook group, the two of my favorites are Nourishable and Biologically Normal Infant and Toddler Sleep on Facebook. Obviously, I volunteer for lactation, so I put it in there, and I did put my A to Z group, but those two aren't just sleep-centric, they're about feeding. But the first two, I would encourage join, especially. I'm not adminning of others, so maybe they're going to get swamped today from requests, but I have to say just lovely, lovely info in that biologically normal infant and toddler and in the Nourishable weighted out group. Obviously, Sarah, the chair, will be adding this the YouTube up eventually to the South Carolina Breastfeeding Coalition website. And I just want you to take away, you know, listening and responding to parents' instincts and intuition, listening and responding to parent to infant cues. There's no right way. Oh, and thank you. There is a Spanish link being put in the chat as well. There's no right way. Only one way. Oh, and DHEC, Lynn says, has a full line of breastfeeding handouts. Yes, they do. They're awesome. I love it. Thank you, Lynn. Don't promise to fix normal, right? Just come in and chat about what is normal and help parents collaborate. Sleep and milk supply goals and information is interconnected. Sleep and feeding goals both matter. Like they should both be valued and taken seriously when we come in and talk with parents. Sleeping happens at normal rates. It's really important to talk with parents about what's their values, systems, and risk-benefit decision-making so that they are empowered to make the choice. We're not making choices for them or telling them they have to do something a certain way, for example, with co-sleeping or whatever. And breastfeeding, breast sleeping is normal. Nursing a baby to sleep is normal and healthy. And I just wanted to put up where I got some of these images. A lot of them were from the United States Breastfeeding Committee, BASIS Sleep, Safe to Sleep campaign, and the Neonatal Perinatal, the National Perinatal Association. I love their infographics are amazing. And contact me when you would like. Thank you. And any questions? I did it in the time allotted. And so anybody have any questions, please definitely check out the links in the chat. There was a lot running through. I hope I got everybody's ongoing questions going on in the chat. If you're on the phone, feel free to just jump in. I'll mute my mic. And these slides, I do have about, I would say, an 8-page Gmail or document of all the resources. So if anybody really wants to know like where all this research is, I have like a very extended long amount of resources. So feel free to, let's see, thoughts on how we respond to parents who see breast milk decrease production after sleep training. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jen. I would say I just talk about how it impacts them. So I try to use as non-judgmental wording as possible. We're not here to be like, shoulding all over ourselves, right? Or shoulding all over parents, but just giving, when a parent has been sleep training and they call us about milk supply, what I want to talk to them about is, okay, here is what you're doing. Here is what makes milk. Here is how milk production works. So a lot of information is just giving that information on milk production, really, for parents who are sleep training. Just explaining that they do have a chance to kind of almost relactate, right? Because they're having to relax depending on how long they've been doing it. If they just decided last week to start trying and it's not working, it's not like they can't go back. And if they've been doing it for months, we talk about sleep training. Oh, thanks, Linda. Thanks for your comments. I hope that this was very helpful to everyone. And then somebody else said, this is your next talk, sleeping and nursing. Great. I'm so glad, Jamarius. So thanks, Romaine. Anybody have any questions, feel free to throw them in. And then I'm going to go back to the beginning here. Love the respectful language and encourage conversations with families. Thank you. All right. Well, anybody wants to, please feel free to contact me and email me, and I will send you any of the information or share the slides with you. So feel free to just Naomi A to Z lactation at Gmail, and I will share my slides. Sarah, do you want me to stop sharing? Stop recording.
Okay, I can stop recording. Thank you, Naomi. That was wonderful. Yes, it would be great if you could share your slides. That would be fantastic. There's so many resources on there that people can look at. All right, let me just stop recording here. There we go.